Okay, you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Mark Squilla. Lisa Haver will update us on the school board, and Vanessa Maria Graber will provide information on voting deadlines here in Pennsylvania. So what we're going to open with is an interview with Mark Squilla. But before we get to that, the big news is the long-awaited 76ers impact study for the new arena has been released. There's multiple components to these studies. We have read them, and we're still going through them. We're looking for more information about certain aspects of it. My initial take, though, for what it's worth, is this is more of a this suggests to me that it's better to not do this for what the possible impacts in Chinatown will be and what the projected benefits to the city will be. I don't know right now, as after my first reading, there are elements that I want to double check. There are things I want to be more clear on. And there are things I just want to make sure I read the right way. Am I understanding this economic piece properly? And I'll tell you, I was an English teacher before I started doing this. I have no math ability whatsoever. So looking for having a second set of eyes on certain things it makes sense to me for how I process things, especially when it deals with numbers. But the thing that I can say for sure, without hyperbole or without really having to go back and look at it and say, I don't know about this, is that it doesn't look beneficial for Chinatown. When we talk about the businesses that'll be affected, the numbers they give are more businesses will lose in this in Chinatown than will win, than will gain. And I think that is of significant importance as we move forward in this process, and this is discussed. We recorded this interview with Mark Squilla last Friday before the report was released, but we did discuss what elements or how he would make this decision, what he's looking for. And now what we can do is when you look at this report, you can take that information and look at the way he answers the question, say, okay, now we have a little bit more of a window into how this decision is being made. So here's our interview with Councilmember Mark Squilla. All right. Councilmember Mark Squilla, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy, Larry. Always a pleasure.
I appreciate it. So the big question on everybody's mind right now, as it has been for a while, where are we with the 76ers arena? Where does that stand right now?
Well, right now, I mean, we're still waiting for these studies to be released. Supposedly they've been translated, they're completed, and it's just a matter of time before the administration puts them out. We're waiting to be briefed. We're hearing early next week we'll be briefed about these studies. Then have those studies put out to the public. I have committed that, once the studies and the legislation is done, I would share the legislation with the community stakeholders and, have them at least review them 30 days before introduction of any type of legislation if this project is going to move forward. So we're just hoping and waiting right now for the information from the studies to see what the challenges are, if these challenges can be mitigated through legislation or a community benefits agreement. And if that's the case, then we would introduce legislation within 30 days or not before 30 days of when it is being shown.
Is there anything that would be a deal breaker for you that you would look at and say, well, we can't move forward if this is in place?
Yeah, I think all along, I mean, we've been hearing from the communities what the challenges are. A lot of the stakeholders, you talk about congestion, you talk about traffic, you talk about parking, you talk about small business, right? You talk about even gentrification or increase in real estate values. We know right now, even this year, there's been a major increase in the Chinatown area for assessments. right?
Mhm.
What can we as a city do to make sure any project that we put in these areas uh, do not sort of even further increase the real estate values in those areas, so we sort of gentrify that area, or keep people from being able to stay in the community that they lived in all their lives. But then again, is you're looking at not only the affordability of the area, if you're looking at the congestion, the traffic, how that would affect small businesses. We talk to small businesses, whether it's in the Chinatown area and or East Market Street, right? You have the Midtown Village, which is just on the other side of Market Street. Can we make sure that the increase in volume um, of pedestrians doesn't offset by people not being able to get there? And are those people going to frequent these small businesses? How do we get them to use them if they're there? So I think a lot of things comes into place. It's also congestion. You deal with Jefferson Hospital to make sure that traffic could flow during emergency situations and things like that. We have the convention center there, you have Reading Terminal. You have a lot of stakeholders that have, specific issues. And we got to make sure that these issues are dealt with in any legislation that we have, or in a community benefits agreement that would be codified within the legislation, and we'd be able to add it to the legislation so that it would be part of the law. And if we weren't able to do that, I would say it'd be hard to move forward um, with any legislation to not address those issues and concerns.
And you feel that, so with the briefing coming up next week, that maybe this fall, maybe you would see legislation or a decision one way or the other?
I would say we'll probably have a decision whether to move forward or not, in the fall. But, I don't know if that complete decision of whether it's approved or not would be completed by the end of the year. I'm not sure of the timeline yet, because it all depends on when the legislation is introduced, right?
Mhm.
You have to have public hearings, and then you have to have votes on by council, and then also support of the administration or the mayor. But I do believe in the fall we will have a decision on whether to try to introduce legislation or not.
Okay. As a member of the Kensington caucus, are you encouraged by what you've been seeing over the last 8 months?
What I see now is hope. People have been living in conditions and challenges in their neighborhoods for quite some time, and over the last 4 years or so, it has continually gotten worse. And what I'm hearing from people is that even though you can't, turn a large ship in a short period of time, and so you're not going to see from one day have this, total conglomerate of people on the street, a lot of addiction use, and a lot of quality of life issues associated with that. Be able to turn that in 1 week and say now it's gone, right? So the city has done some initiatives, but the plan takes a little more time to be put in place. The mayor has, asked for $100 million of resources to set up facilities so that people can get help. Make sure we have enough beds and services available for any folks who need it. Make sure there's shelters available, housing available, and all these things take a little bit of time to get up and running. But I think what I'm hearing now is hope from the people who live in that community, knowing that this administration is making it a priority, taking the quality of life issue seriously, even addressing some of the criminal activity that's been happening that was sort of ignored for many years. And they're starting to see that ramp up. And now, when you do see that, now that causes sometimes some other issues, right? Sometimes the people move into other communities, or sometimes you have unintended consequences on addressing maybe a drug gang that's locked into a certain corner. And when you sometimes go and dismantle that, sometimes another group tries to come in, and then you have some other additional violence. So I think you may see even an uptick in some of these things happening as the plan starts to work its way through a progress. But I think it may get a little bit worse before it gets better. But I do see that hope, and I do see that people are really excited about at least the opportunity of putting a plan in place to address their needs.
What are some of the other things you're looking forward to in this upcoming fall session, which begins in 2 weeks, believe it or not?
Yeah, I mean, we start really early, right after Labor Day.
Mhm.
So it's exciting to get back, and and it's not only the quality of life and the crime issues that we're having. I don't know you've been hearing about it, but we have about the assessments that have been
Yes.
uh, given from OPA, Office of Property Assessment, to the residents. And so the challenges are, why have the assessments increased so much in certain areas? How do we look at that? What protections do we put in place? We have some already with homestead. We increased homestead from 80,000 to 100,000. So if you live in a home, you be eligible for $100,000 off your assessed value. So if your house is worth 200,000, you would pay taxes on 100,000 and not the full 200,000. But that's just one thing. We have loop, we have senior freeze. We now introduced this year a new low income freeze for folks who are eligible. We're able to freeze their taxes because of their low income. But we also need to understand OPA and why we're seeing large increases of 20, 30, 50, 100% in 1 year, right? That's something we really have to address. I introduced the legislation previously. It's called um, tolling legislation, where if somebody appeals their assessment, they pay last year's taxes until a decision is made. We're looking to do that again. I'm looking to reintroduce something that they said was illegal, which is a cap on increases in assessment. I don't see why, if we're doing assessments properly, that you can increase 50, 60, 100% in a year. It doesn't make any sense. And I think we need to be able to cap that at a certain percentage. And I know 10% sounds high, but 10% will be a lot better than 50% and 100%. And maybe we can negotiate from 5% to 10%. I don't know, but we need to put a cap on there, and we'll probably get pushed back from the law department and the uniformity clause. And maybe we need help from the state. Maybe we need a state authorizing legislation to do this. And we need to actively look at that also, because we have to protect the residents. And if OPA isn't doing their job, we got to do what we need to do. If they're not doing their job properly, we need to put more protections in place for the residents of the city of Philadelphia.
Okay. And that's one of our big pushes right now, is letting people know about the programs and things and how to appeal. That's what we've been spending the last month on.
Appealing is important, but
Yeah.
also there's some people who don't have homestead yet, right?
Right.
That's $100,000 off your assessment. So you're saving almost $1,400 right there. If you have homestead. And there's people who live in their homes and still do not have that. There's seniors who never applied for the senior freeze, right? So, and some people may be eligible for Loop or some other programs that are out there, don't know. Always reach out and check and see what you may be eligible for. And you may be eligible for more than one or two programs. And, we could help lay that out. Our office or the city of Philadelphia could help lay that out, which we would think, will be better for you, what program's best for you during this time, and longevity wise, because with whether it's the abatement or some of these other safeguards, you only can have one. Sometimes you can't have more than one of these safeguards at a time. And so, hopefully the people know what's available to them, and we have to make sure, if they don't know, that we get that information out to them.
Right. Question we've been getting a lot lately. What is it the average day for a council member? What does that look like for you?
Well, obviously, every day, including weekends, is, you're working for the constituents. Our job is that we work for the taxpayers of our district and the city of Philadelphia. So we usually start off, and I usually try to get a morning meeting in before coming into City Hall. And then we start City Hall usually around 8:30, 9 o'clock with meetings, go throughout the day there. And then after that day of meetings that we have, whether it's working on legislation or just having independent meetings with some community members or people who have concerns in their area, or people who are coming in to look to do something in the city, whether it's open up a new business, have a development, so forth and so on. And our schedules are full throughout that day. And then after that day, we go out to then the community meetings. So starting usually around 6:30 to somewhere around 9, we have community meetings that we go to, and community events. So we try to get at least maybe once every quarter to get to one of these community meetings throughout the district. And we do it by invitation. If they don't want us to go, we're not looking for more things to do. But, all these RCOs, registered community organizations, have monthly meetings. So a lot of times there's a lot of concerns. If nothing's basically going on in one area, they might not ask you to go. Nothing's really happening there. We also meet with our police districts and our the PSAs, they have meetings throughout the area. Either I'll go or somebody from my office go. If I can't go into these PSA meetings that are, deal with, issues with public safety in that particular area. And then the community events at night, people have, whether it's a park event, we have plenty of friends of parks or advisory counselors for our parks and recs. And, they work with us through activities grants to throw these events for people in the community. And we get invited to them to stop at those events to just, show up that we support what they're doing, because these residents and these organizations do a lot for the city of Philadelphia. For a little bit of resources they get from our office, they really, are able to engage. They program some of our parks and recs. They have events for our parks and playgrounds. And so it's always important to show them that we appreciate what they're doing and to show up at those things.
One of the things we hear from residents of the first district, and this isn't to say anything about any other district, but we always hear first district does really well on services for people, constituent requests and things like that. How much of your time is spent dealing with constituent services?
Well, I have a staff of people in City Hall, and it's every day, 8 hours a day, people calling in or emailing, whether it's an L&I concern, whether it's a pothole, it could be an inlet or a sewer that's clogged, it could be a street light. That's all day. Constituent service also deals with, quality of life issues, right? Unhoused people, homeless, people in addiction, crime, public safety. As far as, recently we had a bunch of tires and wheels being stolen from vehicles. We had catalytic converters a year back. And so, we have to deal with them and then work with our departments or the police department or whoever we think is necessary in order to address that issue, and make sure that at least when the constituent reaches out, we get back to them, maybe not with an answer right away, but we're working on it, or connect them to a department who could work with them to get that done. I think it's very important if somebody reaches out, and my district is very diverse. So I'll go from, lower South Philly up to a lot of big immigrant area in South Philadelphia, up through Center City, up all the way to Kensington, Northern Liberty, Port Richmond, Fitchtown areas, so Chinatown. And so everybody has different needs. And what I first said was, if somebody calls with you and said, hey, they forgot our trash, they didn't pick it up. I mean, I don't want somebody saying, well, do you know what they're dealing with in Kensington? Somebody just got shot. I want you to say, we'll address that. We'll call over to sanitation. We'll make sure it gets picked up, right? Then the same way, if I have a drug dealer in my corner, or I just had a serious incident on my corner, that all gets the same attention, and making sure that we're addressing those issues, but also responding to them in a reasonable time so that, those folks know that we do work for them, right? And it's important to understand when you're an elected official, and even everybody on my staff, we're paid from taxpayer dollars. And so, to try to judge somebody when they call in, they're calling in because they tried everything they can and they don't know how to fix it. And so it's up to us to try to address that. And even if sometimes people get a little upset on the phone or in the email and, say some things, and I always say, put that to the side. What is the problem? Let's try to address the problem and work on trying to resolve it. Let's get a resolution or a solution in place. And sometimes we can't do things and people get upset because it's not the solution or resolution that they want. But what they can say is they might not like the end result or the answer, but they can't say that we didn't try and work through a process to get them what they needed.
All right. I'd like to bring Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, Councilman. How are you?
Hey, Denise, how are you?
I'm good. I'm coming to you from Chicago, where the Democratic National Convention just finished up. And there's a question I've been asking all of your fellow council members, because I've bumped into a bunch of them here. And it kind of relates to, the work that you do with the Kensington Caucus. As you know, Pennsylvania is once again being asked to save the Republic. The number of people that came through the caucus breakfasts was like an all-star team of Democrats just asking, please get out to vote, please get out to vote. And that's important. But, since Pennsylvania, is often asked to save the Republic, I believe we should get something for our trouble. What would you like to see Philadelphia in particular and Pennsylvania overall get from a Harris Walz administration if they win?
Well, I'm going to say I agree with you 100%. Pennsylvania, to me, whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win the election. And I think it's important because in Philadelphia, Philadelphia comes out to vote and has a large numbers. The possibility of a Harris Walz administration is very likely. If we don't come out to vote, or there's lower turnout in Philadelphia, then it possibly could go the other way. And Pennsylvania is always purple. I know people don't like that idea, but in the sense that we are needed, right? And you see both parties in Pennsylvania right now constantly in here asking us to help. And I think, what you're saying is very important. Yeah, we're helping and we'll do everything we can to make this happen. But I see a way where infrastructure dollars and dollars from the feds is very important to the city of Philadelphia. We have, whether it's for money that we could get for a open air park space, or money that we could get to build out our ports, right? This is really important for us. We talk about roads, we talk about highway safety, we talk about these other things. Then we have federal mandates that come without any dollars. And one of them was to, make sure we recreate all our handicap ramps throughout the city of Philadelphia, right? But we're using city of Philadelphia dollars in order to do that. That was a mandate from the federal government. Not that we don't want to do it, but it would be nice to have some additional resources to help us do that, because we got to use our tax dollars in order for that to happen. I think that infrastructure, I think job creation dollars, and I think money to help with affordable housing is probably the top three things that we could ask for from the administration. And I think they should be more than willing to provide that to us. And we have great opportunity on our port. I don't know if you're familiar with our port, but it's been getting a lot of work lately. And just to maintain those jobs down there, we need some new cranes. We need to create a larger berth for new ships. And you talk about creating jobs, you're talking about violence prevention. That's all part of it, right? Because you have jobs, family sustaining wage jobs down there where people don't need a college degree, right? They could even be returning citizens. They could be people without have a struggle in their life, or maybe had a past and maybe had a felony charge, but you could still work in these jobs and you could create a family sustaining atmosphere where people could sustain themselves through jobs like this. So I think it's really important for us to push that envelope as we're going to help to do this anyway, right? And we're going to make sure, but I think there should be, it's not a quid pro quo, but I look at it as a community benefits agreement, just like we do with developments and other things, right? We help you, and because of us, you are actually in your position to help us. And I think we have to make that known. Our leaders have to make that known. Our governor and our mayor have to also make that known. And together, we're not going to say, if you don't do this, we're not helping you, right? Because then it sounds, some people may feel that way, but I think that it's, we help you, you help us, we work together. And as a team, we could both make this happen. And so I agree with you, though. There should be, anytime we do developments in the city, and even in my district, we have what is called community benefits agreement, whether it's installing lights around a neighborhood, whether it's adding security, whether it's putting money into a local playground or park, right? And that, because of some of the negative impacts that we have, we create this benefit where the developer or whoever's doing that project, adds certain things to that specific area. And I think it's sort of the same concept. And we as a city need that, because we could grow our base and actually grow jobs and make it safer and cleaner for the city of Philadelphia with that additional help from the feds.
Okay. Now, since I've been here, I went to Wrigleyville, which is where Wrigley Field is. And Wrigleyville is not just Wrigley Field, it's restaurants and shops and apartment buildings and all sorts of stuff. And one of the folks I was with, who was a Philadelphian, he was like, well, if the Sixers could do something like this, this would be great. Would that be, is that something they've approached you with, like starting like a Sixerville, or is it just the stadium?
Well, if you noticed throughout the development now of all new arenas and stadiums, if you see, the mindset is to build up. And the funny part is Wrigley Field is one of the oldest, right? And you see it's right in the middle of downtown because most of the people lived in those areas. That's where you wanted to have them. But since cars and all sort of made people move further away, and then they put these stadiums in different places, they were in sort of islands of their own, which is surrounded by parking lots. The new mindset, if you look at all the new arenas that are being built throughout the country, is to put them in a more dense populated area, to be able to build, to use that as an economic driver to then build additional restaurants, retail, apartment building, and even more housing. If you looked at what Comcast is looking to do, even around that sports complex, is they want to add something like that. They want to build a whole new infrastructure there, right? So the Sixers, as part of their plan, would partner with Macerich, who is part of the mall ownership, with a parcel that they would buy. And Macerich owns property not only in the mall, but also on the south side of Market Street. So, they would then be able to have access to build apartment buildings, mixed use buildings with additional retail or commercial space, with restaurants, bars, taverns, and things like that. So that is part of their long-term goal. But even when you're saying that, we still have to look at what are the impacts, right? Because if you can't mitigate the impacts of just an arena, anytime you build there, anytime there's additional developments, whether it's more restaurants and bars, it brings more people in the area, more congestion in the area, and things like that. We have to be able to make sure we can mitigate all of those things. And what it does is it forces people to go to these events and places without using cars, right? You only have so much parking. People then take public transportation. If you're in Chicago and you're going to Wrigley Field, if you're driving, it's going to be impossible to get there. So what do? You look at the best way to take public transportation and go there. Now, the mindset in Philly here is a little different. Everybody always drives. But if it's not feasible for you to get there by driving, you got to find alternative ways to get there. And I think that's what the 676 Development Corp is saying, is that more people will take public transportation, walk. You would have Uber drop-offs and things like that in areas not real close to the arena, but other areas. So therefore, people could then frequent these small businesses, restaurants, and bars, and then stay a little longer afterwards because it takes you a little time to get out, and also help the economy that way. So yes, that is part of their goal. But we have to get past the initial part of the arena itself and the impacts of the arena. And that's why it was important to do these studies. And the studies are going to be released shortly. I'm hearing all the translation is done. So I think these studies will also tell us what are the challenges. And it's up to us to find ways to mitigate those challenges through legislation or a community benefits agreement. And then if we can't, then you can't move forward. But if you can, then you do.
Okay. In terms of assessments, I think that part of the reason why people were so shocked at their assessment, in addition to how high some of the taxes went up with some of these, is because of how often they're assessed. They feel like this assessment just came out of nowhere. Should we do more frequent assessments? And is there any kind of legislation that says how often you're supposed to do assessments?
By law, assessments have to be done every year. By law. Last year, they did not do assessments, and it was an agreement between, I guess, the administration and OPA, which I'm sure if it was challenged, people would have won the challenge. But who's going to challenge if somebody don't do an assessment and doesn't raise your taxes, right? But what happens when they don't do that assessment is the following year, now you have 2 years worth of assessments. And so the increase is there. It should be mandated that assessments are done every year. It is mandated, and we should not be able to waive that mandate for any reason. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we've been arguing this for the last 12, 13 years since I've been on council. And, assessments have to be accurate. It's supposed to be actual value. The AVI was actual value initiative, which means what you could sell your property for. And, OPA will sometimes say that, oh, well, you were getting a break for 20 years and we just didn't assess it right then. Well, that's not the resident's fault that you didn't assess it right then, right? It's up to us to be able to say, we should not have increases of 50, 75, 100% in one assessment cycle ever, right? maybe the first time you did it, since it was the first time we did ABI, and that's what they said, and this was the challenges. And the reason why I voted against ABI, I didn't think we were ready then, back in 2013, because I thought it took too long for OPA to explain how they do their assessment process. And they were getting this CAMA system in that was supposed to make it more streamlined. But we see that this is a complicated city. There's a whole different type of properties throughout the city of Philadelphia. There's different neighborhoods and different things to take into account. So we have to make sure that the assessments are accurate. And I'm still not positive they are, even though when they get their assessment from the state, they say they fall within the range of that, of accuracy. But if you're accurate, you would never have to raise somebody's assessment 50, 75, 80%. It would never happen if you were accurate in the beginning. So, I think the problem was, if you remember, even before I was in office, there was, I don't know if it was Committee of 70, but it was, a good government movement to take political influence out of the assessment process, right? To have it split between OPA and BRT. They weren't going to be the same anymore. They would be two different entities. OPA is Office Property Assessment. BRT is the Board of Revision of Taxes, who you appeal to. And therefore, there would be no political influence in that process. You have professionals doing it. The problem is, once you take politics out of it, when there's a problem, everybody wants us to fix it, and we don't have authority over OPA's assessment process, right? So, and again, I'm not saying good government is bad. I think there is a process where you should have the professionals do their things, but there still should be some ability for the elected officials to weigh in on how things are done. And so what we're left to do is put in safeguards, right? We've done a lot of them. You saw Homestead, you saw Loop, you saw Senior Freeze, now you see Low Income Freeze. You're going to see tolling, which is going to be able to make you appeal and pay last year's taxes. But now we're going to look to try to do a cap. So we're trying to do things because we're not involved in that process. But it makes us do it on the back end. And so we're going to continue to fight for our residents and for the OPA to be able to do proper assessments. But right now, our goal is to put protections in place, because we believe some of these, raises that we've seen are just astronomical and really should not happen. And so they're the challenges, though, we face as the legislative body.
Now, you mentioned that you've been working pretty hard throughout the summer. And despite the fact that, folks sometimes think that you all just, take the summer off. Do you get a summer vacation? And what does a summer vacation look like for Mark Squilla?
Yes, I actually, last week, I had a week down in Wildwood, down the shore. Every year, I usually throw a fundraiser down in Wildwood, and then I take that week off. And so, unfortunately, though, when I take that week off, and I was down the shore for the whole week, I didn't come up, even though there was a possibility I had to. You still do emails and you're still returning calls, and, people are calling the office. My office is still open. So, we did, I took a full week off in the summer, and it was like August 9th to the 18th. I was down in Wildwood.
All right. We'd like to thank Councilmember Mark Squilla for joining us on the program. There's a little bit more to that interview that we're going to put it all on the website so people can see it. But it's always good to talk to the council member, and we thank you for being with us. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray, back from Chicago.
Yes.
Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And I'd also like to bring in Lisa Haver, one of our other guests tonight, to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the school board. Lisa, you wrote a piece that appeared in the Hall Monitor newsletter yesterday, and what came through, for me anyway, is disappointment with kind of where we are right now and what's going on with this board. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Hey, Larry. Hey, Denise. Good to be back. Last week was the first board meeting of the new, I should say, iteration of this board. Because if you recall, Mayor Parker brought back 4 incumbents and appointed 5 new people. So this August, when school starts, this was the board's first meeting during what I would consider this new school year. Now, I know we used to complain that the board meetings were too long and they would go on for hours and hours and hours. Now we've got a different problem that that board meeting was over in 2 hours. And there were, I believe, 40 official items. When I say items, official items that the board has to vote on. And this meeting, those items totaled about $70 million. That's not including the 3 charter renewal items. And we've been in an ongoing battle with the board and the SRC before them, that when they renew a charter school, they don't tell you how much this is going to cost. Now, of course, you can't know everything about the cost, but they can give us a projected cost. And we looked this up, the members of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools. Yeah, we estimate, we look at the budget and we say, okay, how much will these 3 schools cost over the next 5 years? Because charters are renewed, other than in special circumstances, they're renewed for 5 years. And, it's tens of millions of dollars. It was like, I think we estimated to be about 85 million. That's a minimum, because costs go up every year. There was, I want to say presentation with air quotes, because the schools that are approved, the charter schools that are approved, are put on a list months ago. And then at some point, the director of the charter schools office gives all the information, maybe a couple months before the board votes. So this was about 45 minutes before the board voted. When those items were posted on the district's website, it was after the window for the public to sign up to speak closed.
Yeah.
So even if you got up and you had signed up to speak and said, I want to change what I want to say, what kind of informed comment are you going to make about information that, is just presented?
Mm-hmm.
So what was distressing about that meeting was, there was really no interaction between the board and the people who came to speak to them. And so this meeting was over in a couple hours. So that's including 30 speakers. So with the President Reginald Streeter's remarks, Superintendent Dr. Tony Watlington's remarks, 30 speakers, 2 hours. And as I noted, the vote for all of the items except for the 4 charter, there were 3 charter renewals and 1 charter amendment for a location change. When you look at, they take the 3 charter votes separately, but then everything else is mashed together and they call it the consent agenda. And so if there were, say 36 items, spending about $79 million. That took 1 minute.
Yeah. Yep.
And, President Streeter will poll the members. Does anyone have a question? There were no questions. There were no questions, as I pointed out in the article, for Hall Monitor, doesn't somebody want to ask why charters are being renewed when they score below 50% in academics?
Yeah.
Does somebody want to ask why the CEO of Global Leadership Academy, which was one of the schools renewed, makes $100,000 more annually to run one school than our superintendent does to, run 217 schools? Do they want to know why KIPP West Philadelphia got the lowest rating, does not meet in finances?
Well, so one of the things that we talked a little bit about is curriculum. And before we get to that, before you transitioned to the role of watchdog, you were a public school teacher for years.
Yeah.
What is it like to take that curriculum and then if they update the curriculum, change their curriculum, what does that do to you? And how do you implement that in the classroom?
That's a good question. I'll tell you, one of the most jarring moments for me as a former Philadelphia teacher was when Dr. Watlington gave a shout out to previous superintendent Arlene Ackerman and said words to the effect that when we look to the curriculum that Arlene Ackerman brought in, that was the gold standard. And I will just say, I don't think I'm alone in saying this, that was an ushering in of a very bleak time in district history, because you really it was, when I say the tail wagging the dog, you're not supposed to teach according to a test. You're supposed to teach and kids learn and you do creative things and you take trips, and then the test should be aligned to what is it that you're trying to teach. And at that time, and it was a time of, No Child Left Behind and more charters and more privatization. And in order to do that, you need more and more testing. So if you're going to have everybody taking a standardized test, then you have to have a standardized curriculum. I'm not saying that's what Dr. Watlington is introducing here. My question is, I would have liked to heard at least one of the board members say, why do we need a new curriculum? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with the one we have now?
That was kind of the question I had, especially since I looked at the price tags for the curriculum. And I was thinking, because I covered the educational standards thing that the state was on in the mid to late 90s. And I saw a lot of people getting flown around all over the Commonwealth in private jets and getting put up in 4-star hotels in the name of, creating, this new academic paradigm. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at how much they want to charge the city, the school district for this curriculum. $70 million.
70 million was the total. So at this meeting last week, the price tag for the science curriculum was, I believe, 31.6 million. Now
and the district has everything you need to implement it, which is what I found even more interesting.
Yeah. Also, and I speak to people who are still in the district and teaching, they're not even sure. I will just say and speaking to people, doesn't sound to me like it's even mandated. It seems like some principals are saying, yes, you have to do it, or some district superintendents are saying, yes, you have to do this. So it seems like a very expensive program. And during the Ackerman years, they had to have 3 extra days of professional development just to learn these whole things, all this new curriculum. But it was not good because it really, stopped teachers from being creative. It brought in more test prep. So when it's not so much the curriculum itself. I haven't read it. I'm not trying to teach it. My question is, if I were sitting up at the board, I would have said, do we need this? Why do we need so many new curriculum? And I might have even brought up the head of curriculum who's sitting right there in the room. Tell us what's wrong with the science curriculum. They purchased
a presentation, even a short presentation to explain a little bit.
Yeah. There's something called illustrative math that they brought in last year. I don't remember the name of the reading program, but it's, this is all adding up to $70 million. And it's not for every grade, I would like to say. The science curriculum, I believe, is for 8 through 12.
Now, another question I have is, do they evaluate the curriculum every year? Because this sounds to me like you're changing the curriculum every year or every other year. And just as students are starting to get the hang of what they're supposed to learn from that particular curriculum, you basically change it, which, is going to affect test scores. It's going to affect whether or not the students are able to, do their best. It's going to affect a lot of things.
Well, yes. And when you say, do they evaluate the curriculum? I think that would be the purpose of the standardized test. And of course, the district has to give the students, elementary students, the PSSA, the Pennsylvania State Standard Assessment, and the high school students have to take the Keystone. So they can't not give those. But what they don't have to do is pile on. They have to create new assessments. Like even for kindergarten students, it's you don't need to have new curriculum and say, okay, what we're going to do? We're going to have benchmarks now on top of those government required standardized tests, so we can have some benchmarks to see if our new curriculum is working. That's how these things tend to go. That's how I have seen them go. And so that leaves really very little chance for teachers to give their tests to their students based on who they are, how long it's taken. Maybe you thought it was going to take a week to teach fraction, and maybe it took 2 weeks. Kids are kids. Schools are different. That kind of standardization, as I pointed out, the board. Well, I say the board. I'm going to say the board president because, as I said, many of the people on the board, I haven't heard their voices yet. But President Streeter often says we're going to be a child-centered district. Well, show us that. But it's troubling to me, and I will sit there during these meetings and think, why did the board members who are up there? Why did they want to be on this board? I mean, I mentioned this when they had that thing that they built as a town hall, and nobody said anything. I mean, I'll tell you exactly who said something at this last meeting. President Streeter, Superintendent Watlington, Joyce Wilkerson made an announcement about some possible legislation in Harrisburg, and Vice President Wanda Navalis, after Superintendent Watlington's extensive presentation, asked one question, which really didn't. I mean, it was a good question. How are we going to hire more people, Latinx people as teachers? Good question. But nobody asked him anything about what his presentation was about. And I just told you everybody who sat up there who spoke.
So what are you keeping an eye on now that the school year started, and what should people be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think we do want to see what's going on with the curriculum. And that's not something that, somebody, a parent or person without a lot of educational experience. I'm always, when we go, when ABS members go and speak, we're talking about what is the board doing. The board is the 9-member governing body of the school district of Philadelphia. Mark Squilla, very, very, very interesting article. Interview. He's accountable to people. He is elected by people. He was chosen by the voters. He will show up on Hall Monitor. He will talk to the Inquirer. He has something to say because his constituents deserve to know what it is that he is intending to do and how he's going to vote. We don't want to, whether you are elected or not. I refer to the people in the city as the board's constituents. They are their constituents, even if they didn't get a chance to vote for them. And one of the things that I think is concerning is, when I say it's not just like the length of the meeting or people, kind of sitting there like bumps on a log and not doing anything. It's creating a vacuum of leadership.
Yeah.
If 30 people get up there, and I would say like there were like 4 issues where you had maybe 4 or 5 people who came on the same issue. And people talk and they say, this is my concern. And they just, you're just staring back. And then when the vote comes, you just hit, you don't say, I heard what the people from SLA Middle School and Powell say. And I do understand, but there's just no acknowledgement that anybody came to talk to them about anything. And when you have that vacuum of leadership, who's going to step in? And one example that I gave was, and we heard it again yesterday or today, buildings that are closed because of the heat. And of course, you know, we realize that we're underfunded. I think our focus is always okay if we're underfunded, why spending, you know, $70 million on curriculum? But my point here is when you create a vacuum of leadership, somebody's going to move in. And Council Member Isaiah Thomas, who was the chair of the Education Committee for City Council, has said, as he did yesterday, at least on Twitter, I saw this, talking about a building authority. We need to create a new authority to have some decision making over the school buildings. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's issued any kind of report or in-depth paper on what he means. But when I hear that, I think most people think, oh, you know, we have buildings that aren't air conditioned. We have asbestos and lead. Yeah. But what I hear is if the board is not doing what they need to do and addressing the people and talking about how they're spending money, it's going to be easy. You know, we already have that problem. But when you have somebody saying there should be a building authority, you're not pushing back. That is troublesome.
All right. Well, Lisa Haver, thanks so much for joining us as always. And we'll be talking again soon because there's always something to talk about with the school district. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Denise.
All right. We'd like to bring in Vanessa Maria Graber here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the election and dates and deadlines and things. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
Hello, Denise and Larry. I'm doing well. A little hot, but, you know, still hanging in there through the summer.
Yeah.
It is going to cool down again, so that's good, starting tomorrow. So that's great. And I see Oscar in the background.
Yes, he's on the mend, doing much better, and we're excited to be here tonight.
Great. All right, so tell us a little bit about some of these deadlines and procedures that we've been talking about.
Well, I wanted to come on and do this segment because I've been doing a lot of research about elections and democracy coverage, and also the role that journalists play in combating mis and disinformation around the election. And so to all our listeners and viewers out there, you definitely can look to the Philadelphia Hall Monitor as your election source. And if you're looking for verified information, you've come to the right place. So I just want to read some information about misinformation and elections. Free Press, of course, in full disclosure, I do work for Free Press, but we conducted a poll in the spring, and that poll found that 79% of Americans are concerned that information they see online is fake, false, or a deliberate attempt to confuse people. 76% of people surveyed are concerned about the 2024 presidential election misinformation. And only 28% feel very informed about local elections. 44% feel somewhat informed about the election. And so the more local the election, the fewer people believe they have enough information to make informed decisions. And so, of course, those numbers decrease with different minority groups such as Latinx, AAPI, and African American people. And so that's really important to note because those groups of people are also disproportionately targeted for disinformation, especially about elections. And so in the next 80 or some days, we're going to see a lot of mis and disinformation, especially on social media, about voting and elections. So again, you can come to the Philadelphia Hall Monitor for that information. And I just wanted to give some general overview about PA and New Jersey elections. So November 5th is the general election. It's a Tuesday, and polls are open from 7 to 8 p.m. And the last day to register to vote in Pennsylvania is October 21st. So if you haven't registered, you're new to the area, you're a first-time voter, there's still plenty of time to do that. And you can do that online or by mail. You can go to your local Board of Elections office, or you can go to vote.gov. If you just Google search PA voter registration, you can also fill out the information online. And you can also do it at PennDOT and many other government agencies. So in order to be eligible, again, you have to register at least 15 days before the next election. So people are telling you it's too late, or you see any fake news saying it's too late. It's not true. You have plenty of time. You do have to be a citizen of the United States for at least 1 month before the next primary, special, municipal, or general election. You must be a resident of Pennsylvania in the election district in which you want to register to vote. So if you have moved, it is a good idea to update your voter registration. And of course, you must be 18 years old on or before the election day of the next primary, special, municipal, or general election. So if you're 17, but you're going to be turning 18 before or on election day, you are still eligible to vote and able to register. So again, you have to register to vote at the address where you actually live. Owning a property or a business in a county doesn't necessarily make you a resident of that county. So for folks in New Jersey, October 15th is the last day for voter registration. October 23rd is when sample ballots go out. So that's a really cool thing about New Jersey. You get sample ballots mailed to you. And unlike Pennsylvania, New Jersey does have early voting. Unfortunately, Pennsylvania does not. If you want to vote early in Pennsylvania, you do have to vote by mail. But in New Jersey, there are designated polling locations where you can vote early. And you can also apply up until October 29th for a mail-in ballot, but for the general election. So, but you want to do that early because it might not be mailed to you before election day. And you can also do that online, or you can send in a paper application. Those mail-in ballots have to be received on or before election day. And one thing that you should know, and this happened in 2020, is that we might not have election results on election night. So just prepare yourself for that. In Pennsylvania, you cannot begin counting mail-in ballots until election day. And so if we get a lot of mail-in ballots this time around, that process might take some time. Sometimes there's recounts. And so there might be a day or a few days before we get the results of those numbers, especially in very competitive races. And if we get a lot of mail-in ballots from places outside of the US. If you see something fishy online, especially around election-related information or voting rights, there's plenty of places you could go. Factcheck.org is a really good site. If you speak Spanish, like many of us, like myself, who are bilingual, you can go to factchequeando.org, which is a site that does Spanish language fact checking. You can reverse Google image search images that you see. So just be careful with the advent of AI technology. There are now fake videos and audio and things that are, generated by AI. So definitely be aware of all of those things as you're perusing the internet and social media. And just before you share, make sure you verify the information. And if you ever have any questions, something looks really, really strange and you're not sure, you can always email us or DM us at the Philadelphia Hall Monitor. We're here to help you verify, fact check all your election related information here in Philly and New Jersey.
All right, Vanessa, thank you so much. That's about
Well,
the time we have for tonight.
Yes, well, you can contact Denise for all the Delaware information.
So, that's about all the time we have tonight. We'd like to thank Mark Squilla for being with us, Lisa Haver, and Denise and Vanessa. As always, next week on the show, we'll have City Controller Christy Brady. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.